My brother and his wife had decided to take charge of the household, asking me to find another place to live. My mother, siding with them, treated my presence as an inconvenience. They don't even seem to realize who's been covering most of our household expenses. The lack of respect caught me completely off guard. I'm Melissa, a 31-year-old woman who moved back in with my parents after college. I had ventured into the corporate world, eager to carve out a successful career, but the challenges proved overwhelming, so I returned home during a period of joblessness. During this time, I explored remote work opportunities. With my background in science, I started freelancing as an engineer, taking on small projects at first. The pay was modest, but the freedom was everything to me. It was a stark contrast to the rigid structure of corporate life. As I gained more clients, my income grew, eventually matching what I would earn in a traditional job. But the biggest hurdle was convincing my parents, particularly my mother, to understand my unconventional career. My father understood after I explained, but my mother, who held traditional views, just couldn't wrap her head around the idea of working from home. Even when I showed her client emails and pay statements to prove my work was legitimate, she remained skeptical. She would often question the sustainability of my career, implying it was somehow shady or even possibly connected to some questionable group. Despite the steady income that contradicted her doubts, she also fretted over my reliance on what she viewed as unstable, unemployment-like benefits. I had considered moving out, but my savings weren't quite enough to support such a transition yet. During this period, my father's health took a downturn. His leg and back problems worsened, requiring nursing care, and he had to retire early. He reassured me that his pension would cover our needs, but knowing my mother's spending habits, I feared the money wouldn't stretch far enough. As I watched my father struggle, the fatigue and worry on his face mirrored his concern for our uncertain future. He had always been my steadfast support through college and when I returned home due to mental health challenges, and the thought of leaving him to navigate his health issues alone weighed heavily on me. My mother, too, was visibly shaken by his sudden decline, struggling to adapt to the change. With these circumstances in mind, I felt an overwhelming sense of duty to give back to the family that had supported me all these years. I promised my father I would help financially from then on. He was initially surprised, questioning if my income was enough, but I reassured him and showed him the stability of my finances, which seemed to ease his worries. Encouraged by his acceptance, I took on the responsibility of contributing to household expenses, medical bills, and other financial obligations. Each month, I began transferring a substantial portion of my income into my father's bank account, mindful of my mother's frequent use of his credit card. I took proactive steps to manage our household finances more efficiently by creating a new main credit card for myself and giving my mother a supplementary card to help curb her spending. My father, always cautious with money, urged my mother to adopt a more frugal approach. Despite my contributions, my mother remained skeptical, even questioning whether it was still appropriate for me to live at home. I defended my position by pointing out the financial support I was providing and explained that my absence would make things more difficult for everyone. Although she was initially unconvinced and suspicious of my motives, my father's steady persuasion eventually convinced her to let me stay. As I continued to balance my work with household responsibilities, I began to notice that my mother was increasingly taking my efforts for granted. Her expectations for the household chores grew stricter, and she often criticized me for not completing tasks quickly enough. "Can't you finish your chores faster?" she would complain. I tried to explain the challenges of juggling a full workload with household duties, but she dismissed my concerns. The strain between us grew, and our relationship began to feel irreparable, especially in contrast to the understanding and appreciation my father showed for my efforts. Despite this growing tension, we managed to carry on in this way for a year. However, after that year, my father's health took a sharp turn for the worse, and he was hospitalized. I visited him daily, offering him support and maintaining our bond during this tough time. During those moments of shared concern, my father expressed his gratitude and fully acknowledged the tension between my mother and me. Despite the emotional toll it took on me, I stayed committed to supporting my family, drawing strength from the memories of my mother's dedication when I was in school. However, the dynamic in our household shifted unexpectedly with the arrival of my brother Matthew and his wife Catherine. They announced they would be moving in to supposedly lighten my load. The news caught me off guard, and I couldn't help but notice my mother avoiding my gaze during the discussion. While Matthew and Catherine claimed they were here to help, there was an unspoken implication in their words that I wasn't doing enough. My mother subtly hinted that I needed to contribute more, and I was left feeling both surprised and unsettled. I learned that Matthew, a graduate of a prestigious college, had secured a position at a well-respected company. This revelation made me question the real reasons behind their sudden decision to move into our home. Surely, with Matthew's substantial salary, they could manage without relying on my financial support, especially since I was already fully engaged in my career pursuits. Adapting to life with Matthew and Catherine at home turned out to be more challenging than I had anticipated. One morning, as I was deep in my work, Catherine's voice cut through the silence. "Wake up, Melissa. Make breakfast." She banged on my door, demanding my attention. As someone who was already up and focused on my tasks, I explained that I was working, but they insisted I prepare breakfast, pressing me to hurry. The added demands of accommodating my brother and his wife only complicated the already tense dynamics at home. Catherine's tone left little room for protest, so reluctantly, I dragged myself to the kitchen. Our family usually enjoyed a leisurely pace in the morning, savoring meals together, but with everyone, especially Catherine, around, the pace had changed. I had always thought it was customary for a wife to prepare breakfast for her husband, but Catherine insisted on a more collaborative effort, so I joined in. Despite my best efforts, their dissatisfaction was immediate. "Is this what you prepared for breakfast? This isn't enough," they critiqued. I had meticulously arranged the plate: soft scrambled eggs, a crisp lettuce salad, freshly buttered toast, and a succulent sausage, hoping it would be appreciated, but clearly, I had missed the mark. "You don't have to eat it," I retorted, surprised by their blunt criticism. Their shock was evident, and it quickly turned into confrontation. They demanded to know who I thought I was, and Matthew, often condescending and perhaps influenced by our mother, mocked me. Despite my attempts to explain my work commitments, they dismissed them outright. "What kind of work is that? Are you crazy?" they exclaimed, frustrated by my lack of availability and the disruption to my own work. I grabbed my laptop, ignoring their further protests, and left the house. As I walked away, my brother's voice followed me, demanding to know where I was going. I didn't respond. Instead, I made my way to the hospital where my father was staying. Rushing into his hospital room, I found him looking up at me with a surprised expression. "Melissa, what's wrong? You seem flustered," he observed. I recounted the events of the morning, and my father's concern was immediate. "I didn't know they were acting like that." "I'm sorry, Melissa," he said. "Don't worry about it. You can choose your own way of life." Feeling lost and increasingly worried about my mother's comfort with Matthew and Catherine at home, I shared my concerns. The conversation with my father gave me a much-needed perspective, reminding me of the importance of standing firm in my choices. "You don't need to be in a place where you don't feel comfortable," he reassured me. "All I want is for you to live happily, in the way you choose." Bolstered by his support, I made up my mind to leave that evening. When I returned home, I walked into a tense atmosphere that felt like something out of a dramatic film. My mother, brother, and sister-in-law were sitting together, their faces serious and stern. My brother immediately confronted me, accusing me of shirking my responsibilities and claiming he had to take the day off because of my absence, a decision I internally questioned. Given its seeming lack of urgency, the confrontation escalated, their voices growing louder. Finally, my brother issued a command, his voice cold and harsh. "Get out of here. From now on, the three of us will live together. If you don't want to stay, please leave. We don't need an overbearing presence like you to support us." His words hit me like a punch. I stood there, stunned, only managing to mutter a confused, "Why?" But my protest went ignored. Matthew and Catherine were adamant, declaring I was no longer needed, especially with our father absent. My mother, aligning herself with them, saw me as nothing more than an obstruction. Frustration boiled inside me as they downplayed the financial support I had provided, focusing only on their own complaints. Their insensitivity and refusal to acknowledge my contributions enraged me. I couldn't let this continue. To make them understand the impact of my role, I quietly put a plan into motion. I discreetly transferred the funds from my mother's daily use credit card to an account I controlled, knowing it would catch her off guard when she tried to use it and found it empty. I also initiated a transfer of funds from my father's account, a crucial part of maintaining the family's financial stability. This wasn't just about money, it was about showing them the true scope of my contributions and reinforcing my position. They needed to understand the weight of their actions. I made sure that only my father's medical expenses could be withdrawn from the separate account I had set up, a detail my mother was unaware of. This meant that a significant financial burden would now fall on my brother and his wife. While I wasn't fully aware of the specifics of my brother's income, I was confident he would feel the weight of the financial strain. Once I completed all the necessary arrangements, I packed my belongings and announced my decision to leave. "I'm leaving this place," I declared, expecting resistance, but to my surprise, my mother, brother, and sister-in-law were visibly shocked. They hadn't anticipated such a firm decision from me. Their expressions of astonishment were laced with a subtle hint of relief, though, as they made belittling remarks about my departure. "You're finally leaving? We've never dealt with such a troublesome person," my brother sneered. "You're not coming back, are you?" I met their words with a firm, "Of course not, don't contact me." They smiled, seemingly pleased with my exit, but I couldn't help wondering how they would cope when the reality of my absence, and its financial consequences, set in. Starting a new life in a peaceful environment, I found solace and the freedom to enjoy my own space. Refreshed and focused, I immersed myself in my work. However, as I had anticipated, my peace was soon interrupted by an unexpected call from my brother. "I told you not to contact me," I said, my tone sharp with annoyance. "What's wrong?" His voice carried a mix of surprise and urgency as he asked about my involvement in the family's financial transactions. I reminded him that I had explained my work commitments repeatedly, but neither he nor our mother had taken them seriously. "Well, Mom said a lot of things, and I was a little confused," he admitted, the realization that perhaps they had misjudged the situation beginning to dawn on him. "We're in a financial bind. We're having trouble managing the expenses, and Mom's spending has made things worse." Though a part of me felt some sympathy, I stood firm. "I was able to support you while I was living there. Now that I'm not, you'll have to manage on your own." The situation took an unexpected turn when my brother urgently contacted me again, asking for help to transfer money into his bank account. Baffled, I half-jokingly asked if he was serious, especially since he worked for a sizable company. To my surprise, he admitted he had been fired due to a significant mistake at work. The revelation left me momentarily speechless. It seemed he had moved back to our parents' house under the assumption that there was plenty of money to go around, possibly relying on a stable pension after our father's retirement. As I considered the situation, I couldn't help but find some irony in the thought of his shock when he realized the reality of the financial contributions I had made to the household. Both his wife and my mother soon joined in, pleading for financial help, claiming they were nearly out of savings. My mother even revealed that my father had decided to stop contributing to the household finances. In response, I firmly declared, "I've already supported you enough. It's time for you to take responsibility and support yourselves." I ended the call and chose to cut off communication, reinforcing my decision to distance myself from their financial troubles. Meanwhile, my father, aware of the tension between him and my mother, consulted a lawyer and decided to pursue a quieter life elsewhere. I continued to visit him daily, cherishing our close relationship. During one of these visits, a friend informed me about my brother's ongoing struggles, which further highlighted the consequences of their lack of financial prudence. He had settled into a modest apartment and adopted a more frugal lifestyle. My mother, who had always been a homemaker, struggled to adapt to her new job, and my brother found it difficult to get along with his younger colleagues. Despite his wife's efforts to support him, the pressure eventually became too much for her, and she left, forcing both my brother and mother to face their challenges on their own. Concerns remained about my mother, as she continued her old habits of overspending, leading to mounting debts. However, I recognized there were limits to how much I could help without compromising my own stability. I stayed focused on my own endeavors, working diligently from my comfortable living space, gradually accumulating more resources, and contemplating new ventures. Throughout it all, I made sure to spend quality time with my father, who remained a steady source of cheer in my life. Each moment with him was cherished, as I appreciated the peace and happiness he found away from the familial tensions.